Okay, in this video then we're going to have a look at how a for loop could be used to do something a little bit more useful than count up or print out the same thing over and over again. So we're going to imagine that someone is running laps of a racetrack and they want to find out what their average time is and what their total time is. So what we can do is we can start off by saying, well, first, how many laps did you run? So when they type that in, obviously it needs to be stored in a variable somewhere. So I'm going to put num of laps. Notice it's all one word. What variables always have to be one word. So then number of laps, it's going to be a number, so I'm going to again say that it's an integer and I want them to input it into the computer, and I'm going to put enter laps completed. And I'm going to close both brackets because I've opened two. Now what we then want to do is we want to create our other variables that we're likely to use later on in the program. Now, as I said, we want to find out what their average was. So we're going to start off by creating a variable called average, and we're just going to set it to 0 at the moment, because you have to set it to something. And we're also going to create the total, and we're going to set that to 0 at the moment, and we'll change it later on. So what we're then going to do is, say we know that they've ran 4 laps. What we want to do is we want to ask them the same question 4 times. So rather than writing out code lots and lots of times, we can use this for loop that we looked at in the last video. So we could say 4x, which is our counter, in range. Now it might not always be 4. We might type in 10 laps or 100 laps. So what we need to do is we need to loop around however many laps that they completed. And we know that because we've stored it in our variable num of laps. So we're going to say 4x in range, however many laps they did, do the following. So to start with, we need to get them to enter their first lap time. So we need to store that somewhere. So we're going to make a variable called lap time, and we're going to set that to be an integer, and it's going to be input, and we want to enter the lap time. So because again, I don't like typing, I'm going to copy and paste that from up there. So now our lap time is going to be a number, and they're going to input it, and rather than enter the number of laps, they're going to enter the lap time, so maybe 20 seconds for the first lap. And that will go round 4 times if we type in 4. So if we do that, if we run the program, you'll see enter number of laps completed, 4. It's going to do the following 4 times. So say the first lap was 20, then I suffered a bit and it was 22, then I had a speed up and I got it in 15, and my last one was really bad because I was tired, and it's asked us 4 times. Now again, it doesn't do anything with that data at the minute, but we can see that our loop is working. So what we now need to do is we need to maybe keep a track of the total. So we know that the total has already been created and it's currently 0. So now what we want the total to be is we want the total to be equal to the current total, which at the moment is 0, plus the lap time that they just did. So let's sort of say we did 3 laps. So 4x in range 3. So we can do this 3 times. Enter your first lap time. We did it in 10 seconds. So total now becomes 0 plus 10. It then goes round again. So now it's saying enter your next lap time. So maybe we did it in 12 seconds this time. Total now becomes the total, which is 10 from the previous loop, plus our new lap time, which is 12. So the total now becomes 22. What we can do then is we can print that out once the loop has finished. So we could say print the total. And we run that, and we'll test it out with some nice easy numbers. So enter laps completed. We did 3 laps. The first lap took us 5 seconds, then it took us 3 seconds, and then it took us 2 seconds. So that should add up to 10. When we press enter, you can see that it's printed out the total as 10. Now, it doesn't really tell us what that 10 means. So to make it nice and user friendly, we could say, okay, print out total time was, and then we can add on the total. Now when I run this, we're going to get an error. Now the reason for that, and we'll see it working, let's just say that we did 1 lap to speed it up and we did it in 13 seconds. We've got an error because it can't convert an int to a string. You can't add a number to a sentence. As I always say, what is squirrel plus 7? It doesn't make any sense. So we need to tell the computer to just deal with this number as though it's text. Don't try and add it in terms of like a mathematical add, just add it onto the end of the sentence. So now if I run it again and we did 1 lap in 13 seconds, it now says the total time was 13. So that works nicely. The only thing we haven't got is the average. So to work out an average, a mean average, what we need to do is we need to divide the total time by how many laps they completed. So we could do this after the loop. So what we can say is that the average is going to be equal to the total divided by how many laps they did. So num of laps. And then we can print that out as well. So I'm going to copy and paste this because it's quite a long, complicated line of code. So I'm going to put the average time was and the string of average. So now if we run this and we say we're going to do 3 laps. We did the first one in 10 seconds, we did the second one in 12 seconds, and we did the last one in 8 seconds. So what this should say is that in total it took us 30 seconds and the average should be 10. And you can see that our program has worked correctly. So that's one way of using for loops. There are lots of other ways that they can be used, but the main thing is whatever is under this line that is tabbed across, and by tabbed I mean 4 spaces here or the press of the tab key, whatever's tabbed across will run however many times is in the brackets there.